Representative Kerner has signed on as a co-sponsor of House Bill 307, and Representative Powell has signed on as a co-sponsor of House Bill 479. 307 pertains to short-term vacation rentals. Its companion is Senate Bill 356. House Bill 479 pertains to sober homes. Its companion is Senate Bill 582, which was filed by Senator Clemens. Both sober homes and short-term vacation rentals are transient uses that are affecting the character of our single-family neighborhoods. It's affecting the quality of life of our residents, and local governments are asking for your assistance so that we can have some basic regulations over these type of uses. And so I'd ask for your consideration as these make their way through their committees.
Yeah, just a comment. I don't think there was a question there, but you know, I think I've been on the right side historically on the vacation homes and certainly sober houses. I think everybody up here knows that issue quite well. Just so you know what the process is, I think it's important because sometimes you go to the computer, you go, so somebody has co-sponsored, somebody has not co-sponsored. The thinking behind co-sponsoring for me, I generally am wary of co-sponsoring bills, number one, that may change to a language that I don't agree with. So I tend to either support legislation that I'm very familiar with the author of the legislation early, where I know they're going to, be very cautious with what they do, or I'll wait until a bill gets to the floor because the likelihood of a huge change, it's not as high as while you're going through the committee process. I'm a little cautious there. It's easy to put your name on a bill. It's much more difficult to pull your name off a bill. And I generally enjoy being respected by all members of the legislature by not pulling that little thing at the end there. So that's why some of our names might be there. Now in terms of sober houses, obviously that's a good bill. In my particular case, and I think it's good you guys have know this background. There's a computer you go into, you actually look at the bill, you hit yes, no. The bill sponsor has to say I agree or I'm not going to put you on as a sponsor. Those type of things occur in the background that you wouldn't normally see. So I just want to let you know every member probably has their own way of dealing with those things. So if you don't see a name and you're upset, don't necessarily worry. Look at our track record. If you do see a co-sponsorship that really gets you angry, then let us know. And then we can have that awkward discussion with a member. But I just wanted to let you know a little bit of how that works.
Well, I appreciate your gratitude. Thank you.
Real quick though, on the sober home issue, especially Rachel Andres is with us. She's sitting right over here. She knows this issue. She's with our delegation. She knows the issue. She knows what's going on with some of the sober home language and why we have some First Amendment or free speech type issues, which it gets frustrating because I actually sponsored this bill 3 years ago, and it's just been very frustrating that we can't get more done. But if you want to talk to Rachel about it, she knows the ins and outs as to what the issues are really underlying it.
Next question, Tom.
Good morning. Tom Convoy. And I've got a question, or rather, you've talked a little bit about the St. Lucie River and estuary and comp plans, and House Bill 703 is out there, and there's some concern that it would take away some of the teeth of the Martin County comp plan and other comp plans around the state. And I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of it and also hear what you had to say about it.
I think you got us because without telling us what House Bill 703 is, it's going to be hard to answer that question. So can you give us a little bit of details? Because
essentially, House Bill 703 was filed by Representative Petronas of Panama City, and it effectively takes away a lot of the home rule as far as, especially towards agricultural practices. And there's a lot of concern that it will reduce the teeth of the Martin County comp plan.
There's a question on the list of questions that we sent you all ahead of time to talk about the bill.
Does it have a Senate companion in it? Are you aware of?
I'm not aware of the Senate companion.
Just as a general principle, anytime Tallahassee tries to take away home rule authority of the municipalities, I tend to oppose these efforts. They love to talk about small government, but then they tell the local cities that govern the closest how to do their job. It's just a standard operating procedure over there.
I concur with Representative Kerner.
Generally speaking, and this is what I'll do with respect to my colleague, Representative Petronas, if he files an environmental bill, I vote against it. He has, by the way, made some incredible decisions to improve his bills, though. I will say that. He's gone out of his way, I think, to work with folks. You know, the legislature, one year it wants to, you know, take local control away. Other years, it wants to basically be the, you know, decision maker. I don't see a particular reason for this particular bill, but it is Representative Petronas. He's, I think, going into his final year. I believe he's the chair of, well, I know he's very, very involved in a lot of the decisions that are made high up. So it's good it was number 12 here on the questions. It's good you asked the question, and I'll certainly be watching the bill. The odds are I'm not going to co-sponsor that.
Tom, just to let you know, I looked it up. It does not have a Senate companion, so that's very good news as far as those who do not want it to get passed, because normally when we go anywhere, what you have to watch at this time is that it doesn't get stuck in a committee bill, but I'll keep a lookout for it.
Thank you.
All right.
Great. Terrence Bailey. About 10 years ago, the state made major investments to bring biomedical industries into the state. But since then, we haven't seen any new deals or efforts to diversify Florida's economy. Do you see anything like that coming down the pipe? Scripps was a major investment at the state and local level, but is there another sort of different industry that we're recruiting to bring into the state to diversify our economy?
Medical marijuana?
And I usually do co-sponsor that one. Clemens is, yeah, and I support it. Yeah, I don't do it, but then again, if there's no random checks.
Recreational marijuana?
There may be a lot of recreational too. If I may, you know, Scripps, I personally feel was a good investment. I think that it's the type of thing we need to do in terms of diversifying what generally Florida is known for, which is, you know, Mickey Mouse and beaches. You know, we're 20 million people. We've got to diversify our economy. We've got to build in industries, I think, that mean something and provide people an ability to participate in the economy by having dollars to spend. My personal feeling, and I think this goes back to what Representative Rooney was talking about earlier, you know, each of these investments that we make as a state, we need to understand, and Clemens I think was talking about this too, what the actual impact is. If they're basically completing the goals that they were asked to accomplish when it came to this. Now, you know, I don't know where you think on how you feel about that. I know, I believe Representative Hasner, majority leader at the time, was also saying the same thing I was. And again, it is a sign that in terms of the legislature, you know, there's a bipartisan effort to move on these things, and you'd be surprised where a lot of us may end up. But obviously, we've got to move in those directions. One thing, I'm not going to be critical, God no. Something that I would be paying attention to if I were you as an industry as a whole, and it's not, I don't think it's in here, maybe I didn't read it. You know, we need to kind of turn lemons into lemonade. And I think I mentioned this last year, if you're not riding the wave on a reaction to sea level rise, you are missing an opportunity to help be part of a new industry, whether we like it or not. That will create the type of jobs too, especially with this group. I think that'll be very important in terms of engineering and everything that goes with it. And sea level rise, I would ask you to make that a major priority. A lot of people don't believe it's happening. And I wouldn't make that case in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade, or Key West, which has seen a 9-inch rise of sea level over the last 100 years, and that's going to continue to increase. So thanks for the question. I took it elsewhere, but sorry.
Every year in the legislature, we generally have an economic incentive development program that comes out as a committee bill on finance and tax or economic development. It's a little bit too early to see what that's going to look like, but there will be some form of package to incentivize business. I know one thing, it's going to be a little bit tougher for years on because of some of the failures that we invested in as a state. I know there's a move to tighten up on who we give money to and how we track it to make sure that they are creating jobs and it is a benefit to Florida and they're hiring people right here from Florida. So there will be some economic development package. You know, the business climate here in Florida, I believe, is very important. You know, Governor Scott touts a lot of time about the business climate, but remember, that was us in the legislature. When Governor Christ was governor, when Leader Pafford and I got to the legislature, we just started to work on policies of the economic downturn to make sure that Florida had an environment created so jobs can grow, our businesses can grow, and we can expand our jobs. You're starting to see the fruits of that labor years to come. So I think keeping a good business climate in Florida and yet incentivizing the right industries, and we will be doing that.
You know, despite what happened with the John Texter, you know, animation thing in Florida, I'd love to see Florida become much more of a player. We're trying in the film and entertainment industry. I just think with Disney here and the climate that we have here, and again, the tax structure that we have here, which was pretty conducive, I think, to business. I really think the film and industry and entertainment type industry, we could, you know, take a lot of that from California. Despite what happened with that situation, as Senator Abruzzo, there probably will be a negative reaction to that, but I hope there is. I hope we continue to try to make inroads with that particular industry.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions? Go back to our list here. Sustainable buildings. Do you think the legislature is going to be considering any additional efforts to support the implementation of high-performing, sustainable, and energy-efficient buildings?
It's my gut reaction since Governor Christ had worked on that in the current administration is looking at ways to run a campaign. My guess is there's nothing that's going to happen. And again, it's the reality. You've got good public policy and you've got politics that are intertwined into those discussions. And I think this might be one of those examples where, you know, there's a roadblock.
If it involves imposing regulations, sustainable to me is a good thing, but I think to certain members in leadership, sustainable means more expensive buildings, and that oftentimes is a deal killer for the current leadership, that very responsive to special interests. So I highly doubt it, but it's not my wheelhouse, so I don't really know.
If anybody else, I have a couple more questions I can ask from our prepared questions. If anybody else in the audience decides they have a question, you can just make your way to the mic and we'll accommodate you. Let's go back and talk about the budget a little bit more. As a result of, and this was mentioned earlier, as a result of projected revenue increases, looks like we're going to have $1 million budget surplus this next fiscal year. What do you think the priorities are going to be for the budget? And do you think it's going to be used to expand state government or basically be used to cut existing fees and taxes?
Thank you. You know, I think it's pretty clear, even early on in the process, that a large portion of that budget is going to be going to rollbacks. Again, when Leader Pafford and I were elected in 2008, against what we voted for, there was a raise in license and tag fees, things of that nature. I was concerned because it was, to me, a tax hit on everybody, middle class, lower middle class. And the governor, the chairs, at least in the Senate, of the pertinent committees are intent on rolling that back and using a large portion of that money There is a large education increase, which of course is a good thing, and I'm extremely passionate about education. However, the majority of that education dollars, actually 2/3 of it, is dependent on our property taxes locally being raised by local government. So not a lot of, I think about 330 million or a little above that is going from the state. The rest of that massive $19 billion in the budget in education is dependent upon local taxes going up. There also is a movement that I support to increase small business tax exemption. 50,000 is currently $275,000. So you're going to see a lot of that money being gone as far as rollbacks, in my opinion.
You know, one of the things that nobody talks about, generally we're also focused on industry and you know, our own little area of the budget, but you know, there are some things that, in my view, need to be discussed. And I wouldn't, you know, when we talk about expanding government or making government smaller, you know, the question I have every year is who are we leaving behind in our budgets? And you know, if we want people to come to the state of Florida, especially seniors and families and large industries who bring kids that need to be educated, and those industries at the same time want a school system that's going to generate the types of skills necessary to move their businesses forward, you know, I think what we need to do now is really look at investing in our government. And what I mean by that is this, you might want to call it expansion, I don't know. But, you know, at some point, my background is public administration. I'm not as smart as Powell or probably everybody here. But there's something called the public good, and it's different than a private good. And as a society, we really need to begin having discussions and determine what the role of government is. It's nice to say it stinks. But at the same time, we're sitting here, we're talking about what government should do to make you happy. You know, we also need to talk about those public goods. And, you know, whether, again, I mentioned it again, it's people on, with disabilities waiting on lists, or elders. And I'm not talking 100, there's 50,000 people, older people, who came to the state who didn't see the type of structure they may have thought might be here. You know, Senator Negron's effort in terms of, you know, the river. There are things we can do with those dollars, and I would hope that, you know, $1 billion, by the way, no pun intended, is a drop in the bucket. We get a $70 billion budget. I think the governor just rolled out, yeah, 74.2 is what the governor rolled out. You know, politics are going to have a role, but I think it's up to us to figure out what that public good's going to be. And it's a reflection on us in terms of government and what type of society we want to live in here. Because government does play a role in making sure the lights work at the intersections, the sidewalks aren't broken, the streets are repaired, the bridges aren't falling, we have clean water. That's a necessary thing, at least those things. God forbid we talk about healthcare in a system that's costing us more if we don't deal with it. So I think there's a lot on the table, and again, you know, I would encourage you to have those discussions. One thing I will say, and I said this the other day, most of the decisions made in the legislature aren't anybody sitting here necessarily. The Senate might be different. It's the Speaker's office. It's a few people, and they guide the process and determine what agenda items are going to be most relevant for a particular session. Knowing that, you know, we've got to continue to put effort on those folks to allow us, I think, in large part, to vote in unison on really smart stuff. And I don't think we always have the opportunity to do that, but I would personally welcome that opportunity for the last few years that I'm in the legislature.
You know, again, being a fairly fiscally conservative person, I do believe in limited government. I think smaller government works best. But in one particular instance, and I think I agree with Representative Pafford on this, the government, one of the major roles of the government is a safety net. I completely believe in that. I believe that we need to take care of our disabled, our elders, our you know, kids. Among one one committee, Healthy Families, and we're dealing with sexual predators, and Representative Kerner's been great on this issue with human trafficking and things like that, and what's going on in our society, in Florida in particular. One of the items in the budget that I think is a good thing in general, but it again goes to show you that there's probably more work to be done, is in response to, we've had, I think, 40 kids that have been killed since June, I believe, under DCF care, under, people going out and trying to make sure that these kids are in good situations, and we've had 40 some odd kids die in this situation. Well, one of the budget items that I was glad to see was that we're going to double the amount of investigators that look to find out what's going on with these kids. But on the other side of that, we're not really doing anything with the case managers, which are these generally young women in their early 20s that are getting paid nothing to go into horrendous neighborhoods by themselves to check on the situation with these kids. So again, I think, while it's good that we're doubling the amount of investigators, there should also be a look-see at the system as a whole to make sure that that we're putting these kids in the best situation that they can be to grow and to hopefully get out of this cycle that through no fault of their own that they've been put in. So, we talk about the environment, we talk about education, but there's things that we have money for that are good, but again, from an overall perspective, is it the best use of that money, and are we getting the best bang out of the buck for that?
I tend to agree with everything that was said, and Rep. Rooney put it very articulately. I used to be a police officer, so in a rural town where it was economically depressed, and I knew that children were being abused at very high levels. And for every abuse that was reported, I'm sure there were 10 or 20 or 30 that never went reported. And when I would investigate these crimes against children, the DCF would come, and it was such a joke. They would show up in their own car, because the agency doesn't provide a car. They have 1,000 files. They're literally just there to check boxes. And that's a reflection of us as a society. There's $1 billion surplus. It's great to talk about small government and limited government, whatever that means, because our tax structure is exactly the same every year. It's just a product of how much ad valorem tax we collect and how much sales tax we collect. So we have $1 billion surplus. Are we going to give that back to larger corporations in the form of a tax break? And that's the way that it'll be communicated to you. We cut taxes, but who did they cut taxes on? Because my property values are rising, so I'm going to be paying more tax. But when you look at our law enforcement at the state level, when you look at what state employees are paid, it's atrocious. When you look at what prosecutors are paid. What about economies of scale? If we paid them more and they continue to stay in that agency and they learned the job better and they stayed there for a career, instead of cycling them through as a training ground, how much more efficiencies would we realize? So I think, much like Rep. Pafford said, we need to make an investment into state government. We need to pay these folks more. We need to give them the tools that they need. Because the people that are getting screwed, quite frankly, aren't us in this room. It's young children, it's the frail, it's folks that need a helping hand.
I'm going to, Representative Abruzzo, Senator Abruzzo.
Thank you. Briefly, Representative Rooney, I'm so glad that you brought up in the budget how they're increasing the personnel for our children. But I will tell you, and I want to support you every way I can in your effort. My office did a tour out in the Glades community. As I mentioned, I represent the entire western community, Belgrade, Milwaukee, South Bay included. And my office did a program where we worked with the social workers for a day. And they're supposed to have about 20 cases each. They have about 45 cases each. So it is a big problem. We are not doing enough, and I would love to see more money go that way, and I want to help them any way I can.
You have a question from the floor?
Hi, good morning. My name is Anish Kohli. I'm a research engineer with Rise International. I work in the climate change and variability in relation to...
Closer. I'm getting older.
I'm a research engineer. I work in the climate change and variability with respect to the extreme events. And my question is, I have heard in the news that Florida is going to become the third populated state in the United States within the first quarter. And what steps is the government taking in order to, with respect to sea level rise or extreme events? Because we have seen the intensity of Hurricane Sandy and the severity of the storm events in the past recent months. So moving forward, what steps is government going to take? And are they going to integrate it to local governments or local municipalities? Because a lot of the local governments or municipalities talk about the climate change or sea level rise, but I don't see anything being integrated into the system. And is there any separate fund for the government to do any research and the adaptation process moving forward?
So it's a great question. I think sea level rise and those type of things. Last February, while I was chair of the Palm Beach County delegation, we had a combined delegation of Monroe, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach meet in Tallahassee to hear about an hour's worth of information on this phenomenon that people are referring to as sea level rise. There may be 50% of the folks in this audience that don't believe it's happening, and that's a fact. One of the things that I tried to do for that meeting was not mention a couple things. Climate change or global warming. Because unfortunately when you do that, you may trigger a partisan type of reaction, which would allow people to come to a meeting like that or decide to stay home. The politics are pretty heavy, but if you look at the budget, if you follow the dollars, up until 6 months ago, actually up until we passed the last budget, I don't know what the current number is, South Florida Water Management, as an example, spent $50 million to improve the water structures along the coast, in Dade primarily, largely because there continues to be this issue. The local governments, which I'm sure you know, in those 4 county areas are working together as a coalition to begin dealing with that. Palm Beach County actually just passed, I think, a resolution to begin dealing with sea level rise. I'm working with my chair just to have a workshop on the issue. A workshop in Tallahassee is like the Merv Griffin show. You ask somebody to come in, they show their clip, they talk about the movie, you go to commercial, and they bring somebody back in for the next workshop. But if we can engage in a respectful discussion about sea level rise, I think you'll find that there may be more of an appetite. I would say my chair is very helpful, but again, not all these decisions are made at a local level in terms of the legislature and you know, the hierarchies there. I have been mentioning it over and over. In fact, obviously earlier I asked you to be part of that conversation because it could be a new economy for Florida. It's going to be devastating here. And I've told people that live in Okeechobee, where I'm going to after this meeting, and elsewhere throughout the interior of Florida, if you don't care about sea rise,